Welcome back to another episode. In this episode, I'm going to be doing something a little different, as well as I will be fishing a striped bass blitz. This is a really cool video because I get to fish this blitz that's in a back bay area. The bass are blitzing on peanut bunker. It's really awesome. And I don't really get to fish a lot of blitzes too often in the fall that are like this, where the water is just so clear you can really see everything that's going on, which is really amazing. And it doesn't happen too often when you can really see the bass pushing the bait around and see the way that they corral the bait in the rocks, and they use the surface of the water and the rocks as like a wall for them to be able to grab the fish. One thing that you need to note in this video in particular is I am using really heavy gear. And the reason for that is because earlier this week I was fighting a really big fish. I actually landed a really nice bass earlier this week on my 150 VSX Van Stall, and it ended up burning out the drag on that reel. So I had to change the drag, change my reel out and my rod, and so now I'm using my 200, which is a little big for these size fish, and my night shift, my Lamiglass night shift. I believe it's the 1 or maybe ½ ounce to 3 ounce 9-foot rod, which is the right size, but it's a little heavy. I mean, it's a very heavy setup that I normally use when throwing big spooks during the summer and in big structure, or if I'm jigging or using bucktails. I mean, that's what I mainly use this rod for. The other thing is I actually ended up losing the audio for this video, unfortunately. So you won't be able to hear any of the drag screaming or anything like that, but I didn't want to just throw away this video because it's really cool and there's some amazing blow-ups and bass blitzing. It's a very cool video, so I decided to do some voiceover for this video. So pretty much I'm gonna kind of bring you through my fall fishing process here. Maybe I'll add some music into this video as well. But I also wanted to just talk a little about, what I do in the fall, and be able to actually do this in a way where you can literally see me catching fall fish, as well as, how I was able to find these fish. So the backstory to this is this fall day, there was some blitzing going on in the morning, and I wasn't able to fish that blitz in the morning. So I got out in the afternoon, I went to where they were, and they just weren't there. And so in the fall, a lot of what we do is, a lot of what we do in the fall is called like run and gun fishing. And run and gun fishing is very interesting because what you do is, like the name of it, is you're literally driving around and you're running around chasing bass. And it's probably the most effective way to do it. And obviously, like, the cell phone has definitely changed the way that this works, where you can have a group of guys that are out there, and literally as they're out there on the water, you can call and text each other and tell you where the fish are, what's going on, and everything like that. So earlier that day, I got the text in the morning that they were on literally the opposite side of Cape Ann. And so I ran over there in the morning, and there's nothing going on. There's a few birds working pretty far out, but for the most part, there wasn't a lot of blitzing fish by any means. It all had ended. Everybody that was there in the morning was just up on the bank, just hanging out. And I show up, and I'm like, oh, I really wanted to get onto some fish today. So I decided to hop in my truck, and I drove around a lot. And I went to a spot that there's no reports. And so a lot of what you do in the fall run is you look at the reports. Okay, hey, the bass were this far north yesterday. The wind direction and the weather is going to stay pretty similar, so they'll move a little far south, but it won't be a giant change in where they were from the previous day. So what they do is they will move a small distance, and then you're able to actually catch them. Here's an awesome blow up. Oh, that's a great shot right there of a bass that hit the plug multiple times. Anyway, but yeah, so you normally you can kind of predict where the fish are going to be, and you're like, okay, if the fish were here, I'm going to go fish a little further south the next day. The other way you can do it, and it's the most risky, is where there's no fish and no reports of there being fish. You go to where that is because it's possible that a new wave or a new school of bass will show up there. And so that was this in particular. I was fishing. I drove much further north than where all the reports of the fish were. And I chased down a school. I was driving on a road and I was, all of a sudden, I look through the trees and I see birds working. And during the fall, the greatest thing that you can see and the thing that will let you know that there are bass is when there's birds working. So I ran to the spot and I chased these fish, and there's huge waves in that spot. I was chasing these fish around the waves, and there's just a big pot of them, and I had a few really nice blow-ups, and the fish were considerably bigger than the ones that are here. All of those fish were 38-inch bass. Like, they were solid bass, and a few bluefish mixed in too. I think I had 2 or 3 bluefish before as well mixed into those fish. And I was chasing them up and down the rocks over a pretty good distance. And then all of a sudden, those bass just congregated on a point and started moving into a harbor area. And so I ran around to a beach and I ran out on the rocks and I looked into the water, or as I was driving, I looked in the water and they weren't there. And I'm like, shoot. So then I ran all the way back to my truck. I jumped my truck and I was driving, and I was going to go by this spot because it's very private. And I was driving, and there was just birds and bass blitzing everywhere. And this is a spot that doesn't hold fish ever. So it was just very random in a fall, a big fall thing that happens. Obviously bass will get pushed into little coves and areas all over the place in the fall. So then I ran out onto these rocks and I started fishing. And the bass were, mostly solid 20-inch bass. And I believe I probably get a few that are probably a little bigger than 20 inches. Some of them might be in that, high 20, low 30-inch class. And I definitely got a few bass during this blitz that I didn't have the camera on for because my camera actually ran out of battery during this, that were all of 33, 34 inches. So that was pretty fun, but that was unfortunately after the camera turned off. So this was a very spur of the moment thing. I just thought, okay, I can throw the camera up and I can get some film and of how I generally fish a blitz. And the cool part about this is there's many different ways that you can fish blitzing fish, but when there's a ton of bait, and so to my right, there is an enormous school of peanut bunker. It's just so thick with peanut bunker to my right, and the bass were pulling little pods of peanut bunker and pushing them off of that main school. And you'll see in the background to my left that there will be, every once in a while you'll see a few bass come up and start blitzing the fish. And I've talked a lot about this in general, just like fishing pencils. I had a few videos where I was talking about this, and I've done a few posts on Instagram where I've been talking about this, where it's like when you're trying to target larger bass out of blitzing fish, how do you do that? And how do you distinguish between schoolies blitzing and bigger bass blitzing? And so one way that you do this is as you're fishing, you're staying very vigilant. And so you see a little pod like this pops up right in front of me. You can tell that these are smaller bass just because you can see their tails and heads coming out of the water, and they're not that big. But when you're fishing, generally blitzes, especially when there's more bigger bass around, you'll see, and a lot of the time this happens primarily with bigger bass. And I know that small bass jump out of the water too, but there's a big difference between a really big bass that's leaping out of the water and then a small bass leaping out of the water. There's a way that some of these larger bass feed where they're jumping out of the water like a torpedo. It almost looks like a dolphin breaching or like jumping out of the water. And when you see that happening, you can tell immediately that okay, that's just like a different class of fish. And that's where you can fire in your pencil popper or your spook. And generally, you give it a few twitches, and that's going to be your best shot at those big bass. And I had many big bass. The biggest one so far this fall for me was a 49-inch bass, where I did the exact same thing. I was catching bass that are far smaller than the ones that I'm catching right now. They were all I don't even know, 15, 20-inch fish. They're tiny. and I'm on a beach and I'm looking around, and then all of a sudden, way out at the end of my cast, I see this big bass leap out of the water like a torpedo, and there's a few other bass that were in a pod with it that were blowing up on the surface. And so I launched the cast in there, and I literally twitched my pencil back and forth twice, and a monster, the 49-inch bass, ate it and just started peeling drag. And I knew it was a big bass, and I was like, there you go, that's how it's done. I mean, it's pretty textbook. You see those bigger bass come up on the surface, and if you can fire cast in there, I know it's pretty difficult to, it sounds simple, and it's simple in concept, but hard in actual practice, because it's hard to distinguish what bass look bigger or not when they're blitzing. But you'll be able to tell a lot of the time when the bass are feeding aggressively. When the bigger bass will jump out of the water, there's just a whole different look to those bigger bass and how they spray the water. It's completely different from like a schoolie just rolling up on the surface. And you can sometimes tell that they're really big when they're doing that like breaching thing where they're just dolphining onto the peanut bunker. It's like a freight train. It's pretty extraordinary when you see them way out there doing that. Yeah, and you can see like right now I'm in the action pretty hot and heavy. It's pretty much every cast right now. I don't believe there's much edits in this video either, just because I was just getting so, it was pretty hot action here. They weren't like blitzing where they were in just one giant massive pod pushing the bait up onto the surface, but the bass that were just swimming around in that wave of fish that was there's hundreds and thousands of bass just in this whole area, just cruising around. And yeah, that really happens on every cove, every beach on Cape Ann at some point in the fall. This pretty much will happen. And it's just about planning out where they're going to be and how you get there. And this happens everywhere, all the way up and down the coast. You're trying to find these places where the bass are going to be able to push bait, get that bait stuck and trapped in. Is this a bluefish? This looks very bluefishy to me. No, it's bass, but still, like, there's some bluefish mixed in too. And that's the other thing that I was talking about. I actually posted a video on my YouTube channel where I caught a bluefish in October. So this was I believe early October when this blitz was, and the bluefish were, it's much later into October now, and the bluefish they were catching were literally a few days ago, mid-October bluefish, which is wild. And I said all season long, I was like, I wonder what's going to happen with the bluefish this year. Are they going to be a big factor during this fall run? And sure enough, they were. So right now, it's kind of hard to see, but to my right, you can see a whole monster school of peanut bunker right up on the surface coming out from the estuary. You can literally see them jumping and flickering on the surface. That was how thick the school of peanut bunker is coming from the right there. That's just amazing. You'll see them, the bass are pushing that peanut bunker out, and it's just extraordinary that there's that much bait in the water. And they're still hitting topwater lures. And that's the other thing. A lot of guys love fishing bucktails and other stuff like that, like jigs, soft plastics during the fall run. If you really want to catch some of the bigger bass out of the school of fish, it really does help throwing topwater. Spooks, there we go, here's some bass pushing through that bait school. That's awesome. But it really does help fishing on top. For some reason, the bass are able to distinguish that better than if it was in a school of bait. Now, I'm not saying that that's always the case. Sometimes in the direction that they're feeding, it can be more difficult to catch them on the surface. But a lot of the time when you're catching bigger bass out of blitzing fish, it's going to most of the time be on topwater plugs. And that's just my personal experience. I'm sure that you can catch some big bass. Like, that's a solid fish that's probably just under 28, if not just 28 inches right there. And there's just so many fish to my right too. It's just unbelievable. I'm looking in the water right now. I remember this, just looking down, just seeing just this massive school of bait and then all these bass. And like, I was contemplating right here on taking some pictures of it just because it was so unbelievable. You're going to see me here. I was just grabbing my camera because I wanted to take some pictures of those fish that were about to blow up on the bait. So now we're cutting a little bit later into the day. This was probably 25 minutes after I just grabbed my camera out of my bag. The bass ended up pushing that bait back over to the right side, and back into that little bay. And it was pretty cool watching the bass and what they do. And, you know, the water, oh, that was a great blow up where you can just see that bass following the plug from far away and just chasing it in. That's awesome. It doesn't get much better than that. Anyway, but the bass were pushing the bait, there's a school of bass, and they're generally about the same size. There's a school like 3 or 4 fish that are all about the same size. And what they do is they push the bait. Wow, this bass is just all over it. And they're just pushing the bait up onto the surface, and then all of a sudden, all those bass in one coordinated attack would come up and blow up on the bait. There's bass swirling right up onto the rock there. And you'll see that, like, in that one clip right there, I actually made a mistake. And my mistake was when I was working that plug, the bass grabbed it, and I felt the bass grab it, and so I hook set, and I pulled it out of its mouth. What you have to do is I did that mostly correct, but you have to what we call fish with your hands, where when you're working a topwater plug and a bass grabs it, you don't hook set until you feel it in your hands. If that big bass, or a bass in general, is rolling up all over your plug, one of the biggest mistakes I see from people that are, you know, new to surf casting or fishing topwater plugs is when they have a bass blowing up on their plug, they just hook set and pull it out of the way, and that can be, you know, very very tough. So because you'll end up pulling the lure away from the fish, and it might not return to feed on it. Okay, so I'll let you guys watch the next few sequences, and I'll add a few more comments here in a little bit. One quick thing I wanted to add was actually that this boat literally pulled up right in front of me. And this is just like one of the most annoying things when it comes to surf casting. If you're a boat guy, you shouldn't be driving over the top of fish. Like, what are you doing when you drive over the top of blitzing fish? If you're gonna fish a blitz from a boat, all you have to do is pull up 15 yards from where the boat is, cast over towards the fish, and there's gonna be fish between you and where the bass are literally blowing up. You don't have to drive literally over the top of the fish. And it's just if you're a boat guy, just don't drive over the top of blitzes, and don't pull up in front of guys on the shore. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm asking for. before I end out this video, I wanted to talk about how I work spooks. And working spooks are, spooks in general are definitely one of my all-time favorite plugs. And the reason for that is they just have such a unique action and they get such a unique strike out of the fish. And I just want to talk about how I work a spook. So you can see that I have my rod at a parallel angle to the water. And when I'm reeling it, I'm reeling with the tweaks of the rod. You can see that I speed up my retrieve so that I give the spook a sharper turn to it. And what I mean by that is when the spook is walking side to side, you can see that it is moving sharply side to side. You can see those bass blowing up right at my feet too. It's just crazy. Anyway, but you can see that I'm reeling in a way that I tweak the spook. I'm tweaking the top of my rod and reeling to give it that extra walking action. And you can see throughout the video, how the spook is working. It's walking side to side. And that's what makes it such a unique plug. And really the whole point and goal of this is when the spook is turning side to side, it creates the wake that it gives off is very similar to a fish's tail, and it just gets those striped bass just so frothed up and really wanting to hit and eat the plug. And you can see I'm just reeling with it, I'm tweaking it, and I'm getting that plug to walk side to side in the water. And it's such a deadly plug. It's one of my favorite, as I keep saying. It is one of my favorite of all time. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was just keeping that. You can see that I keep checking my drag there. I want to make sure that my drag is loose enough that if I hook a big fish or something crazy happens, I'm not breaking off. As I talked about in a recent video on drag pressure, I've really changed my philosophy in not having as tight a drag because I broke off a lot this year due to my drag being too tight. And it's pretty heartbreaking when that happens. So I changed it up this year. I fished a lot of lighter gear, and it worked out a lot better. So this was an awesome day. As you saw, I caught a whole bunch of fish, and I fished for easily 3 times as long as this before I turned on my camera, and then the same after the camera shut off. I fished until sunset, and it was just an amazing day filled with tons and tons of bass. And it was one of those days that it felt really good to get on a good bite of fish, even though they weren't the largest fish here in particular. They were just solid, fun, schooly sized bass. And then there's a few low slots that were mixed in to it, which was just super. Was just such a fun day of fishing. And also on top of that, it being blue sky like it is, it's one of those days that doesn't come around too often where you get fishing like this with such a nice day. So you'll take it when you get it. Anyway, so thank you guys so much for watching this video. Again, if you like the video, please like it. Please subscribe because we got a ton more fall content coming. I'm doing a whole series where I'm just going through all my tackle and gear as well. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.